This video is part 2 of my discussion involving the sister sciences, pharmacology and toxicology. In case you missed part 1, the link is in the description box below. Please like this video, please share it, and please subscribe to my channel. So if you haven't gleaned this from my talk yet, I'll just come out and say it. Pharmacologists wear multiple hats. So thus far in this video, we've put on our chemist's hat, and so now we're going to put on our physiology hat and our cell biology hat. And what I'm going to do here, the way I'm going to approach this is I'm going to go from high complexity to a low level of complexity, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So physiology is the study of how the human body works, and cell biology is the study of how cells work, both down to the basic levels. And here I want to emphasize that these are disciplines all in themselves: physiology and cell biology. There are whole journals on these, there are journal articles on these, and there are whole research labs on these two disciplines, or should I say dealing in aspects of these two disciplines. And hours upon hours, years upon years, and billions of research dollars have been spent just understanding how the human body works. And this is where many of your tax dollars go. And that is into biomedical research, because physiology is an aspect of biomedical research. So in terms of drug targets, drugs are designed for specific targets within the human body, and in some instances, if you have a dog or a cat, your dog or your cat. And so what we know is that this human body, and all of our human bodies, are contain numerous organs, and that are all working together. And actually, I like to think of it as each of these organs has a role to play. The lung, for example, is active in gas exchange. So your respiratory tract is how you respire, and your body takes in oxygen and gives off carbon dioxide. Your gastrointestinal tract, that's how you digest your food. And the liver, well, the liver does a ton of things, but one of its main functions in this instance is the detoxification of exogenous molecules and compounds. So these organs are always talking, and they're always working together, and they all have a role to play in keeping us healthy and upright and living. And so I'm going to use the liver and the kidneys as an example. Both of these organs are critical in the detoxification of chemicals, and also the clearance of those chemicals from your body. And I'll just leave that right there. And again, sickness comes about when one of the organs in your body malfunctions or shuts down altogether. So, if your liver shuts down, or if your kidneys shut down, that's really bad, because you won't be able to detoxify anything, and you won't be able to clear any waste products, or any soluble waste products from your blood, and you have to go on dialysis, which is not something I wish on anybody. So what we also know not only do we have numerous organs in our human body and in our pets as well, dogs and cats, and in rodent species. And that's why, before I go on, that's why rodent species are very useful in research. And that is because they share a lot of the same organs that we do. But what we know about these organs is that they're made up of tissues, and those tissues are made up of very specific cell types. And so now I'm going to go deeper and talk about the cell and how drugs can target pathways in cells, and as a result, treat diseases in whole organs, and then how that relates to the whole organism. So I'm going to talk about that right now. So if you haven't, please like the video, please share, and please subscribe to my channel. So this book here is Lodish et al. And my first year of graduate school, one of the courses that I took was a cell biology course, and we used this book. I found this in my cube a couple of days ago when I was thinking about what I would use to shoot this video. Look at how thick this book is. We used this book. There's a lot of information, in this book, and this tells you a lot about cells and what happens in cells and how they work and how they operate. So once again, I want to emphasize that physiology, and in this case cell biology, are whole disciplines in themselves. And again, hours upon hours, years upon years, and billions of dollars were spent doing the research just to fill this book and to understand how the human body works and how to better treat disease and prevent diseases and understand diseases. And so, and again, this is where a lot of your tax dollars go. And I think I'm going to pull two diagrams from Lodish to kind of help drive home this part, the important points of this part of this video presentation. So, pick up my trusty cell model here. So, in any cell, and your body is made up of billions and billions of cells, there are multiple organelles within the cell, and there are multiple signaling pathways just inside the cell. And this is an example of what goes on inside of a cell. This is an example of some of the signaling pathways right here. So at any given time, the DNA is housed inside the nucleus, and at any given time, depending upon what's happening, the DNA is signaling to the rest of the cell to make new proteins, which initially requires creation of an RNA strand, and then that's called transcription. And then there's another process called translation, which is where the RNA in the cytosol makes the protein of choice. At any given time, depending on the cell type, enzymes are catalyzing reactions. Proteins are being digested and hydrolyzed and turned over and disposed of. Depending on the cell type, hormones are being produced and shipped to other parts of the body. And all of these pathways, once they're understood, are potential drug targets. So, and so if you think about the last section of this video, I talked about how organs in the body talk to one another and basically coordinate to keep us healthy and to keep us alive. And when those organs malfunction or break down, that's when we become sick. So if you look at this diagram right here, this diagram depicts how cells can talk to one another. And there are 4 different ways they can do that. One is through endocrine signaling, and that's how most of our hormones work. A hormone is created in one part of the body, it drops into the bloodstream, and it travels to another part of the body and exerts its effect. This is how puberty comes about in adolescence. I think it's puberty. Sexual maturation. There we go. There is paracrine signaling, there's autocrine signaling, and there is also contact signaling, which is how our immune system works. There are cells that can find intruders such as viruses and bacteria, and they contact those and they recruit other cells to come and attack those intruders. So those are 4 different ways that the cells in our bodies communicate, and that's how our tissues communicate, and those represent drug targets as well. So in terms of the target, the drug is usually designed to modulate or block a biological process. So this can block an enzyme from doing what it's designed by nature to do. On this cell, there are numerous receptors and channels on this cell depending upon what kind of cell it is and what kind of tissue it's in. So you can design a drug to occupy a channel to block communication from another cell. You can design a drug to block a channel to stop something from going into the cell, and you can design a drug to activate a channel so that it's active beyond what its normal physiological activity is. So again, the drug can be designed to do any number of things. The drug can also, if you recall, I said that there are various intracellular signaling pathways inside the cell. The drug can actually go inside the cell and block a pathway or activate a pathway or enhance a pathway. It can even go in the cell and bind to DNA in some instances. So something like ibuprofen, I used this earlier in this video. Ibuprofen is a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug which inhibits the enzymes cyclooxygenases 1 and 2. It's an analgesic, which means that it relieves pain. It makes you feel better when you're suffering from some kind of chronic pain. And it acts by inhibiting the formation of something called a prostaglandin. And prostaglandins cause dilation of blood vessels. And when these prostaglandins are, when the formation of these prostaglandins are blocked, this ibuprofen can reduce inflammation. It has an antipyretic effect, or should I say it has antipyretic effects, and it acts, it can act as a anti-thrombotic. And ibuprofen is used for headaches, toothaches, back pain, arthritis, menstrual cramps, and minor injuries. So again, this has anti-inflammatory properties, but it acts by inhibiting the enzymes cyclooxygenases 1 and 2. Now the other key and the other thing, which I won't discuss in this video, is that your drug target, however you ingest it, whether it's through the oral route, through the skin, or through the inhalation route, It has to be delivered to the target. And again, I will cover that in another video. So that's a little bit of cell biology, and that's how drugs exert their activity or their function on their target. So I want to emphasize that there are multiple contexts for pharmacology and toxicology. And there's a clinical focus, and there's also a basic research focus. And the training for the clinical focus, comes from medical school, nursing school, and pharmacy school. But for the basic research focus, that usually comes in graduate school at major research institutions like the University of Michigan, but also the University of Wisconsin, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, the Ohio State University, and so on, et cetera, et cetera. And that training usually comes in the form of basic research. This is the picture of me here as a younger man at the University of Michigan in the Department of Pharmacology, working at my workbench on my research project. That's where the training for a pharmacologist or a toxicologist comes from. So I think it's important to note that going forward into the future, just like toxicology, pharmacology in some respects is in silico methods are becoming more prominent and very, very important. And so that's when you hear in silico methods, you want to think of predictive modeling. So that's moving from using actual specimens, or should I say using experimental data from actual cell experiments and animal experiments, and then using computer models to model new questions and to come up with answers for new questions. So that's more modeling, that's more computer-based ways of asking questions about drugs and toxicants. So that's kind of where it's going, especially on the toxicology side. Let's see, there are multiple subdisciplines for pharmacology. A few of them are ADME/drug metabolism, autonomic pharmacology, cancer pharmacology, and cardiovascular pharmacology. There's also antimicrobial pharmacology. So there are numerous subdisciplines within the larger discipline. Pharmacologists work in what we call big pharma. So when you think of big pharma, think of Pfizer and Merck. Those are two of the larger pharmaceutical companies, at least in my lifetime. There are also the smaller biotech companies like Amgen and Biogen. And then some pharmacologists leave graduate school with the expertise to start their own little companies. Or sometimes they work for larger companies and then they go get some business training and then they start their own little companies. Pharmacologists can take their skill sets and go work in the chemical industry and do things like help those chemical companies create and register products like pesticides or paints or other industrial chemicals. And again, most of this training takes place in academia. And a lot of students go ahead and stay in academia and they become professors at universities like the University of Michigan or North Carolina Chapel Hill or Ohio State. Pharmacologists, in terms of salary, can start off making $60,000 to $70,000, depending upon their degree level and depending upon whether or not they're in private industry or in the federal government or at the state level. And all of this is covered in my pharmacology blog post in the description box below. I'll close by saying that there are whole professional societies just for pharmacology, where they gather every once a year to share data and to host talks and to exchange ideas. And there are two major professional societies for pharmacology. One of them is ISSX, which is the International Society for the Study of Xenobiotics. And then there's ASPET, the American Society for Pharmacology and Experimental Therapeutics. For toxicology, the big society is the Society of Toxicology. So these are some closing points on pharmacology and toxicology, and these are all covered in my blog posts in the description box below. So I'm going to take us out with my DNA double helix here and my drug molecule. And I want to thank you for watching my videos on pharmacology and toxicology, the sister sciences. And I hope that you learned something. And if you have questions, please leave those in the comments section below. In the future, I will discuss some of the other sciences I've been trained in, because I have exposure to some other biomedical sciences. I will talk about my research path and what all went into getting my PhD and what all went into learning how to do science and how to do research and how to ask questions and how to think as a scientist. And I plan to talk about the differences between science in the private sector and also in the public sector, and what regulatory science is. I'm going to close by giving a few words as to why this is important and why it's important to do this, particularly as a minority scientist. Once again, less than 10% of STEM degree holders are Black/African American, and there are whole communities that have no knowledge of what this stuff is, and they have no knowledge of the STEMs, and they have no knowledge that they can be pharmacologists or toxicologists or whatever it is that they want to be. And I think that awareness is critical, and providing those choices and that access is critical. Pharmacology is a sub-discipline under biology, so it's a biological science, and that's just one of the STEMs. But again, I think creating access and creating those options is critical. I want to shout out once again my brother Amal Dunbar, who taught me that I could make videos in pieces as opposed to doing things all in one take. The science pieces are a little bit challenging because the goal is to make this information understandable for those who have no knowledge of it. And so it's for a general audience, and yet still there are points that I need to hit in order for these videos to be effective. And so oftentimes shooting them is a work in progress, and so it requires editing, and in some instances reshooting, and in some instances optimizing what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. So I want to shout out my brother Amal for equipping me with the knowledge of how to more effectively shoot videos. So there's one other thing before I go. In between this part 2 and the part 1 of this little series here, I recorded a video just on pharmacy and the science that goes into pharmacy. One of my classmates from the University of Michigan's Department of Pharmacology actually watched part 1 and pulled my coat a little bit and said, you know, there's a bit more to pharmacy than what you described. And this classmate had a background in pharmacy and pharmacology. So I shot a video just talking about pharmacy and talking about the science of pharmacy and how it relates to pharmacology and toxicology. And it's really interesting how all three of them go together. So I would encourage you to watch that video. The link is going to be in the description box below. And with that, thank you for watching. Please like this video, please share it, and please subscribe to my channel. And always remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Take care, and I'll talk to you the next time. Bye-bye.